We're going to call to order the May 6th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, the Redevelopment Successor Agency, and the Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight will be led by our distant colleague, Councilmember Sandine, right down there. All right, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma is out of the state tonight on a business trip. So we're going to proceed now to, we did meet in closed session to confer with our real property negotiator regarding properties at Delta Lane at 725-1801 West Capitol Avenue, and no action was taken. To confer with our legal counsel regarding one matter for approval to intervene or initiate a legal action. No action was taken. And to confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with Local 522, Police Management Association, management and professionals and specialists, and no action was taken. All right, so that brings us then to item 1A on the agenda, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, we're precluded by state law from taking action or having a discussion on items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other agenda item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available at near the front door and turn it into the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everyone gets the chance to be heard. And so to that end, we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 2 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that chart simply indicates which item the council is currently considering. We do know that for some folks speaking in public and on television and on this gigantic screen can cause some anxiety. So we do ask that there not be any boos or cat calls or applause or any other demonstrations, and that we try to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. We take the request cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report on any particular item. Once the staff report's concluded and we've proceeded to council questions or discussion or to public testimony, we don't take any additional request cards. So if you're here to speak about a specific item, please be sure to get the card in before the conclusion of the staff report. So with all those preliminaries, we have just one request to speak under item 1A, and it's by Mr. Lowell.
Checking, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. William Lowell, West Sacramento, for the record. About midday when I was riding the bus, a fellow bus rider showed me a copy of a handout from Yolo Bus. On their agenda Monday, they're going to have a hearing which will include discontinuing Yolo Bus stopping on 5th Street between K and L. Apparently, it's getting too crowded in there and so forth, and RT's having too much trouble with backup buses wanting to make their right turn. So I don't know whether they're going to allow, say, another bus stop on Capitol Mall and maybe add another shelter and another bench or something like that, but I think that should be taken into consideration. But I do plan to be at the Yolo Bus meeting as usual next Monday, and if anybody else has any problems with our buses not being able to stop there on 5th between Capitol Mall and L, they should let their feelings be known also. And maybe we can, maybe this is a time to say, hey, it's okay to let RT buses come across over here and do a loop over here. And this way there'd be less waiting by our people who want to go over there and vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowell. Right, those are the only requests that we had under item 1A, so we're now going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there any reports? Are there communications this evening? And Ms. Sandine?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And before I start, I want to congratulate you and thank you on your State of the City address last night. And earlier this evening, we met, the Sacramento Yolo Port District Commission met, and we considered and approved a property exchange with the State of California Department of Water Resources. That was earlier. And then in mid-April, I attended the Capital to Capital program along with Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma and Councilmember Johannesson. And the items we brought back, the delegation brought back to DC, focused on water resources, transportation, and innovation and economic development, all things that I think are important to our city. I also participated in the civic amenities team, and we studied vibrant villages back in DC. We also took our own federal priorities from the city, which are flood, transportation, and port related. And I also attended a policy briefing on water, lifeblood of the Sacramento region's economy, environment, and quality of life. And we heard from high-level administration officials about their support in trying to help us. I think frankly, not a substantial way, but that $50 million was dedicated to drought relief for the western states in Congress's December spending bill. And we had some discussion and dialogue with folks in DC citing the needs, the desperate needs we have related to the drought. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sandy. Mr. Christoph.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, a couple things. The River City Financing Stadium Authority met last week, and we have a new president. His name is Phil Cerna, Supervisor, Sacramento. And I am proud to announce that the lockbox is full. So all of the monies that are necessary for repaying the bond on the stadium is already filled up, and that's a good thing. The local agency formation commission met last Wednesday, maybe Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday. And the main thing that we received was a draft report on the Yolo County flood governance study. Yolo County is looking, and LAFCO is looking at consolidating some of the jurisdictions that all have a common theme, and that is flood protection for Yolo County. And so this is just like I say, it's a preliminary draft, and we'll see where it all goes. And I think that this shared services kind of commitment that the county and LAFCO continues to push this is just one more example of trying to share the services and get the biggest bang for our buck, and see if this is, we will see if this is something that works. And the other thing we did is we did our budget, and the allocations for Davis, Woodland, Winters, Woodland, Yolo County, in order to pay for LAFCO and what LAFCO charges each one of those jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christoph. Mr. Johannesson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Yolo County Housing met on April 16th, and we went through a mid-year budget and also had an update on the hexavalent chromium-6 issue on a couple of wells the property has. This is one of the effects of the drought, having to drill deeper and deeper, having some of this, some of these minerals becoming more invasive into the system. The Westside Housing Development Corporation met on April 30th. The main item of discussion here was the Delta Wayne project, which is on our agenda tonight. I was able to attend on May 4th the Governor's Interagency Workforce on Zero Emission Vehicle Conference, and basically it was a conference with folks that are interested in zero emission vehicles, and the Governor proposed a 2015 ZEB action plan. In terms of what's happening, there's about 20 car manufacturers this year, I think, that are going to have some type of zero emission vehicle coming out, and there's more coming on the market. But kind of the consensus is, and this is, I think Tesla's represented there, Toyota, Mercedes, BMW, and a number of others, is that a lot of the zero emission vehicles now, they're selling, but they're selling by early adopters that are kind of really into the technology, and they've got reasons why they're buying it other than potentially just a pure economic base. So we really heard that the car community is really concerned about what happens after 2020, which is after this first phase of early adopters basically the cars are done after that point. So you have to look at more of a mass marketing type thing. So it really comes down to infrastructure, and that's creating more hydrogen stations, creating more fast charging stations. So I was able to attend one of their fleet breakout sessions, and that's something that potentially, our city could maybe help with. One of the issues with zero-emission vehicles is education of folks about what these things are. Because you'll have folks that want to get in these things or include them in their fleets, and they want to know how to use them immediately. So you have to educate them. For example, you can't just get in an electric vehicle and drive to Modesto. You have to understand the capabilities of the vehicle. You also have to have charging stations and ability to refuel these things in a manner that's consistent. Or that's consistent with their existing schedule. So, but DGS is going to be offering a leasing apparently for these vehicles. We of course have California Fuel Cell Partnership that's based here. So there could be some opportunities for the city possibly to take a lead on fleet operations, but to see how that rolls out. And lastly, just to maybe augment what Councilmember Sandin mentioned on cap to cap, I was on the Innovation Economic Development team. A couple of more significant meetings that we had. We met with Representative Mike Honda from the Bay Area, who's really big into tech support, makerspaces, innovation. Met with his staff. Really excited about the support that looks like it's coming for that type of those type of activities. Of course, we met with Ami Berra, who's very supportive of STEM. And the Code for America, we talked about at length with those folks. We had a very good meeting. Doris Matsui put together a meeting with FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel. I think it's Rosenworcel. This was interesting. So there's really, it's not just a digital divide that the federal government's concerned about, but it's the Wi-Fi divide. Because what you're starting to see is more and more cities become more engaged in app development or online development. More and more people are being left out. And so they're looking at Wi-Fi as a bridge, like prevalent Wi-Fi throughout the community, looking at innovative ways to do that. I know Yolo Housing is putting Wi-Fi in their facilities. They mentioned one example in Coachella where, the kids have to go maybe an hour on buses out to the rural areas. And what they were able to do there is put Wi-Fi nodes within the buses so they could do homework in the bus, and then would park the buses in their neighborhoods to create Wi-Fi hotspots. Because there is starting now to be a homework gap. And we've actually heard stories here about kids, going up to Starbucks late at night to be able to do their homework or doing their student loan applications on their phones. And it's really becoming a problem. So there seems to be a real push now, not only to increase the bandwidth. I think they wanted to get to 100 megabits or something like that. It's miserable now throughout this country, but also to address this issue as we become more services online become more pervasive, that you have folks that can actually connect and use these services. So it was really good. And lastly, we had a meeting with HUD, and we discussed at length our bridge to housing model. And it was a very, very supportive group, really liked what we were doing. But bottom line is their measurements are street to house, street to apartments. That's what they look at. And they look at, how we accomplish that in the innovative ways that we were able to do with bridge to housing. But the bottom line is they want to see off the streets into housing. So, but they're very supportive. Lisa Baker, who is the executive director of Yolo Housing, is well known by that group. I think she's doing a great job. So in all, I think it was a very productive trip that we did. Thank you.
Great. All right, just two items. One is, it was also reported in the paper, but the bill that Senator Pan is carrying on at our request to try to resolve a gaping loophole in the state's laws with respect to sales tax assignment did pass out of its first committee a week and a half ago. The city manager and I were both there. I testified on behalf of the bill. Passed with bipartisan support. The Republican senator from Orange County joined us in supporting. He's the former treasurer tax collector of Orange County. So that was a good start to the bill. We still have to get through the Appropriations Committee, both and then the floor, and then the other house and the governor's office as well. So a long way to go. But there was broad support for the proposal. I think there's one jurisdiction now that's filed a letter of opposition. I forget which county it was, San Bernardino County. So it won't be as smooth as the first committee, but that was definitely a good start. And then second, tomorrow in the Transportation Committee at SACOG, we're going to be taking up the endorsement of the Tiger applications. You know, the Tiger, the new round of federal Tiger grants, the applications are out on the street, and we've been successful in the past with Tiger projects for the Marine Highway at the port, for the Broadway Bridge, first phase work with the city of Sacramento. In this round, I think there are only 5 applications that are pending right now from throughout the region, including one in Winters with Yolo County, and one in Elk Grove, one in Rancho Cordova, and then 2 with Sacramento Regional Transit, one of which is an extension of the Gold Line to here, to Raleigh Field, and to, I think ultimately to City Hall as well. So it's a $34 million project, which I know the city manager has also provided some initial background on the concept at our desks as well, but it's up before the SACOG board this month for endorsement. SACOG's endorsement is not required for the Tiger grants, but because of SACOG's role in the Sustainable Communities process, it does, it generally is seen as necessary in order to have enough to be competitive, enough to win. This hadn't been, this project, the Gold Line extension of light rail was not on our capital plan, but for a lot of reasons this opportunity has emerged. We still obviously would still have to win the national competition, and that's less likely than, I mean, it's certainly not for sure. But it's, the request that RT is proposing is dependent on our concurrence and our analysis about whether or not it makes sense for us and whether the match requirement is something that we want to participate in. So that is also pending. All right, item 1C is appointments to boards and commissions. We will be continuing on that to the next meeting. Just for our application for the city clerk, our commission application, I think has not been updated since we modified the commission structure. So in this current round, where the focus of our recruitment for the Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission is on youth, and also for a commissioner that's particularly connected with the work that we're doing on the active livability with the World Health Organization and with AARP. The portion of the application that asks, are you over 18 years of old? Yes, 18 years of age, yes or no. And if you're applying for the Youth Commission, then you apply for that separately. We don't have a Youth Commission anymore, and I'm a little worried that folks, kids who see that application and see the yes or no, are getting the message that they're not eligible to apply for the Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission. So if we could just modify that so it's clear that in that case that you don't have to be 18 to be appointed at least to one seat on that commission, that would be helpful. It would be helpful in our recruitment efforts. Okay, that brings us into the consent agenda, which is on our agenda items 2 through 15. The city manager is requesting that we pull item 2 and that item be continued to a future meeting. So without objection, that will be the order. So that leaves the consent agenda as items 3 through 15. Any other items on consent that any member of the council wishes to remove, or any other item for a separate question or comment?
13.
Okay, I have 9 and 14. 13-2. So 9 is consideration of support for State Senate Bill 16 on transportation funding. Right? Oh, yeah, 9, okay. So, Dennis, can you describe a little bit the allocation methodology that's embedded in this proposal?
Right. So they're proposing a 12-cent increase in the excise tax for the diesel. Of that, 2 cents will go towards the TCIF program, Trade Corridor Improvement Fund. Other than that, all the money stays in the road rehabilitation program. Of that, 50% goes to the state, and the remaining 50%, half of that will go to the cities, and the other half will go to the counties. Cities will share the money based on population. The counties will share the money based on registered vehicles and
Road miles?
Road miles.
So is that in our interest, that methodology?
That's the methodology that already exists to share the gas tax, so they're using the same methodology.
Okay. All right, I'm trying to pay attention. A lot of these financing mechanisms are like this in that they direct funding for transportation for, based on areas, based on their existing population and their existing road miles. When it's only dealing with rehabilitation, it's okay, because that's where the existing stuff that needs to get rehabilitated is. But as a general rule for allocation of transportation dollars, that's a methodology that our neighbors prefer that is disadvantageous to us, because we have to build a transportation network to serve a lot more new population than our neighbors in Davis or Winters or Woodland or Galt are anticipating. And so those sorts of methodologies tend to disadvantage us heavily. But if this is just funding it's only for rehabilitation?
Road maintenance and rehabilitation,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, item 13 is consideration of agreement with the City of Sacramento for Bridge District Public Art Acquisition Management Services. Mr. Christoph.
Okay, why is Sacramento involved in West Sacramento art?
This type of art acquisition, which is really about a $500,000 art piece, there's really two groups, Crocker Art Museum and the staff at the Arts Commission, Sacramento Arts Commission, that really have the expertise in negotiating with artists in fabrication, transport, installation, maintenance. So I entered into discussions with both of them, and given that we've already formed a partnership with the Sacramento Metropolitan Arts Commission on an NEA grant, and we wanted this work to be consistent with that master planning that we intend to do, we determined that it was the best way to support the city's accelerated schedule for getting this art acquired, selected, installed.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So on the same item, thanks, Mr. Christoph, for raising the same question. I like the approach. I think we've been contemplating at least a similar approach on things like parking, which is rather than develop full-scale implementation of our own staff units here to administer and implement programs for what are still relatively nascent things in the urban part of the waterfront to contract with entities on the other side of the river to be more efficient. So I support that. Do want to make sure we figure out that we're keeping it local in terms of the way that we're doing it. So when this MAC is going to identify about 40 local and non-local artists, how is local being conceived of in that context?
Within the region.
Within the whole region?
Right.
Okay. And for the panel, the panel of 10 plus folks on it, what you're thinking about, so I see it's the public, it's property owners, it's commission members, it's the YOLO Arts Agency, city staff, art academics. I guess the one lens I want to be sure we're keeping on this is, this is art, but it's art in service of the place, right? It's for this community, it's for that place in its historical, natural, planning, land use context. So it kind of jumped out at me when it said art academics, but then I realized it's not just the art. It shouldn't be, the panel should not be mainly people who are interested in creating the best art, period. We're really interested in the best art in the way that it activates and enlivens and tells the story and causes you to think in the context of where it's going in the Bridge District, and similarly when we go to Washington. So we think about composing the panel. We definitely want the expertise of the art community and art academics and all of that, but it's just as important that it be not necessarily a reflection, because it can also challenge local values and ideas, but that it's in the context of the place, and not something. It's not just the most preeminent art academic at UC Davis that's weighing in on this, but somebody who's really looking at these pieces and at the criteria in the nature of where it is. And are we, so if we adopted for the Arts, Culture, and Historic Preservation Commission, have we sort of slid into the administrative policy that they will be the entity to decide to select art projects in general? Is that, I don't know if we ever made that. I know this is not the first time, so this is not raised only by this issue, but have we made a determination that that's a role that they'll play? Or?
Well, I do believe our protocol is that if it is coming from the public arts funding, the percentage set aside, that they would be doing the selection. This funding is not coming from that set aside, so it's really open. So if council directs otherwise, we can proceed.
No, I don't have a problem with that. I was curious as to whether we've articulated it as a formal policy, but I mean, it makes sense here. And I don't have an answer, I'm going to vote for it either way, but as the process proceeds, the commission then is both the final selector, and then essentially half of the commission almost is on, or two of the commissioners, now the commission's got 7 people, so a significant chunk of the commission's on the panel that is leading to the commission, and which has two warping effects. At the commission, you've got 2 commissioners who know everything about it, and the others who know nothing about it at all. And it changes the dynamics of that commission process and the quality of the commission's review. And then also in the review panel, then those commissioners, everyone in the room knows those 2 commissioners are the ones that really have the power in the end. So I'm not objecting to it, but I would be thoughtful as you design processes like that are multi-stage, that result in a decision body, that generally the decision body should not also have representatives in the direct advisory body that is reporting to it, unless it's just a subcommittee of that decision body. So none of that's, you're not asking us to approve all that detail, but I would encourage you to think about that both in this process and as we think about designing new ones into the future. So,
Okay.
thank you. All right, item 14 is the consideration of requests for interested parties for city commercial property in the Washington district. 022. Great. So the only comment I have on this, and it's just general, is that we be sure as we release the RFIP, it's as open as possible. I think the staff report does a good job in describing it. We want ideas that we won't have thought about, and I know there are lots of folks that have passionate interest in this piece of property and great partners of ours that have worked on all kinds of other stuff. But this should not be at all informed by our RFIP should not be informed by any 1 or 2 of them who have specific proposals, but it should be as open as possible so that we generate as many potentially innovative and transformative ideas as we can. So, all right, thanks. All right, if there's no other questions or comments on the consent agenda, is there a motion?
Move consent.
All right, so the consent agenda, items 3 through 15 has been moved by Mr. Kristoff and seconded by Mr. Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 16, which is a public hearing in consideration of Resolution 15-19, vacating 2 portions of right-of-way along Delta Lane and Tower Bridge Gateway.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm Wendy Williams, Senior Civil Engineer with the Engineering Division of the Community Development Department. This item seeks approval of Resolution 1519, vacating 2 small portions of right-of-way near the intersection of Delta Lane and Tower Bridge Gateway to align the future right-of-way with the future Grand Street and Delta Lane intersection and to facilitate the development of the Delta Lane project, which is an affordable housing project which will partially satisfy the city's Proposition 1C housing obligation. One of the abandonment areas is located at the southeast corner of Tower Bridge Gateway and Delta Lane. The right-of-way in this area will be reconfigured to accommodate the building entryway for development. The other abandonment area is located at the southwest corner of the development, which will become the intersection of Grand Street and Delta Lane when Grand Street is extended to the south. The right-of-way in this area is being modified to accommodate that future ultimate configuration. In compliance with the abandonment requirements of the Streets and Highways Code, Resolution 1518 announcing the city's intent to abandon these right-of-ways was adopted by City Council on April 15th. That resolution was posted in the local newspaper for at least 2 weeks before tonight's public hearing and was posted on site at each location as prescribed by the Streets and Highways Code. As noted in the staff report, PG&E has rescinded their previous request for a utility easement since the utilities in question are owned by the city, not by PG&E. This abandonment satisfies one of the requirements to complete the Phase 1 transaction with Delta Lane Housing Partnership as approved with Joint Resolution 1531 just moments ago. The full background and analysis is detailed within the staff report, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have regarding this item. If no questions are at this time, The staff would respectfully request that you conduct the public hearing, adopt Resolution 1519 to complete the vacation of the 2 right-of-way areas, and direct the city clerk to deliver the signed resolution with Resolution 1531 into escrow or otherwise cause the resolution to be recorded in the office of the Yolo County Recorder.
Are there questions for Ms. Williams at this time? All right, seeing none, we're going to open the public hearing on item 16. We don't have any requests to speak on this, but it is a legal public hearing, so does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing, return it to council for any further questions or for motion. Ms. Sandin.
I'll move the recommended action.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Sandin, seconded by Councilmember Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Item 17 is a public hearing to consider objections to the proposed removal of weeds.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Brian Johnson with the Fire Department. On April 15th of this year, City Council adopted Resolution 1522, which began the weed abatement process. Notices were then mailed to property owners who have had or could have weed abatement issues. It is respectfully recommended City Council conduct a public hearing to receive objections and/or comments from those property owners and direct staff to proceed with the weed abatement program. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there questions at this time? All right, seeing none.
Thank you.
Open the public hearing on item 17. Does anyone wish to address the council on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any other questions? I think this is Chief Heilman's first agenda item. We do have a traditional hazing ritual, but this one's not really providing a lot of rich opportunities for hazing. And Brian would take the brunt of it anyway, so. All right, is there a motion on the item then? Mr. Johansson moves and Ms. Sandin seconds. Adoption of the recommended action on item 17. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 18 is a public workshop regarding proposed general plan policy amendments relating to flood protection.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. When SB 5 and related flood legislation has been passed at the state level over the last few years, imposed numerous requirements on local governments, and part of that was a requirement to have some additional flood protection policies within our general plan. So tonight we're here for a workshop in front of you to introduce those policies to the City Council in anticipation of final approval of a formal general plan amendment at one of your upcoming meetings. The new policies begin on page 2 of attachment 2 of your staff report, and these new policies we would be adding on to an existing goal within our current general plan, which is to prevent loss of life, injury, and property damage due to flooding. Many of these new policies do follow themes that we have had in our existing general plan, and they go to expand on those to comply with the guidance that's been provided by DWR. We have presented these policies to the Environment and Utilities Commission as well as to the Planning Commission, who both support their inclusion into our existing general plan. And then ultimately, when our updated general plan is complete, we will carry these policies forward. So at this time, we would seek any input from the council on the proposed policies and also ask that you take any public comment on them this evening. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there questions of staff at this time? All right, we have no request for public comment either. So now, are there any questions or any comments on this item? Mr. Kristoff?
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, these are really sort of straightforward. I mean, we've had some of these in our general plan in the past, and I think it served us well. There are, or at least there seems to be, always new kinds of regulations and something that comes up within a 10-year period that makes us adapt and change our general plan. But I mean, I think for the most part, when we talk about health and safety and all of the other things, it's something that, we've been trying to accomplish and do for a number of years, and making sure that we meet with FEMA requirements and all of those other kinds of things. I just It just makes for good policy.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I think these do make sense. The only, the only thing that really popped out was the item number 32, the escape routes. I know we're going to be talking about that in the next item. And that tends to be, I think a lot of us on council tend to get those kind of questions a lot. What happens in the event of a flood? How do we get out of here? And then it leads to the fire department and the emergency management program that we have and the publicity of that. But so, yeah, I don't have really any issue with this, but that was at least one thing that popped out.
Mr. Mayor, one more thing.
Yeah, Mr. Christopher.
Yeah, and I guess, David, one of the things that we keep hearing about, and that is the Sacramento bypass and how it may be widened, deepened, or whatever. And I guess that's just something, I think that maybe our general plan can comment on in passing, I don't know. But at least it may be an issue out there sometime long-term.
I thought the policies were all good. I mean, so my only comment actually is just editorial, which is, if our whole general plan were organized this way, where it's just policy after policy after policy after, I mean, it's 39 policies. There's no sub-organization or anything. If you're trying to find anything or actually understand the general plan, that this sort of like long iteration of 1 million policies under one title is not the most user-friendly approach. And so, I mean, you might want to think whether some subheadings or just something that would allow you to bring some coherence to what looks like a brain dump of every policy on levies that we could ever think of. So, but the actual substance of it, I think it's good and it's consistent with the law. So, thank you. All right. So this is a workshop only in preparation for future item to come before the council.
Plan to bring this back formally after a formal recommendation from the Planning Commission, along with the environmental document at one of your June meetings.
Okay. All right. And I know this is not an issue at this stage for an item like this, but as we have more items that are like this across 2 commissions' jurisdictions, first I thought, I don't know why this was at Environment and Utilities at all, because it was a planning issue. But it's there because there's several elements in these policies that deal with levees and the flood protection infrastructure, which is what the Environment and Utilities Commission has some jurisdiction over. I'm sorry, that's the TMI Commission. But I mean, being conscious about even within an item, what is the jurisdiction of each? Right now, it's not an issue. They're both aligned. But we want to avoid a situation where other commissions, for example, are encroaching on the Planning Commission's legal responsibilities. When there's an item that has a mixed bag of stuff in it, and vice versa. But I think that, and so, you don't need to put too fine of a point on it. And we're now getting this from the city manager's office that describes which commission is seeing what, which is terrific. So this is, all great progress that's being made. But just as we start to train ourselves about what these things look like, having a clear perspective on, okay, of these 39 policies, 14 of them are before the Environment and Utilities Commission. You're welcome to comment on the others, but the actual recommendation that's going to the council is from the Planning Commission on the other ones, and yours are these. I think will be helpful in the future when there might be items that are more contentious. So. All right, thank you, Mr. Tilley. Item 19 is public workshop on preliminary traffic findings for the General Plan 2035.
Yes, this item tonight is also related to our general plan update. As we get ready to commence doing the formal analysis in the general plan EIR, one of the steps that we have done thus far is we have looked at a traffic analysis for our 2035 scenario. And I have a few slides to sort of help illustrate sort of where we are today and also then where we think we'll be in 2035. This particular exhibit shows in our traffic volumes on our existing roadway network, and the thicker blue lines, such as Jefferson Boulevard and Harbor, and Industrial Boulevard, clearly carry, the large volume of traffic compared to some of the other more secondary streets. So we put this slide up sort of in context so that when we look at the 2035 scenario, we can see a little bit how things we expect to change. Just going forward, this slide here illustrates some of our household employment growth that we're projecting to 2035. It's roughly another 15,000 dwelling units and about 29,000 net growth of jobs, citywide. It's sort of broken out north and south only because of some of our geography definitely influences our travel patterns. And the 2012 is our base year because we're syncing with the current MTP at SACOG. In 2035, we expect to have some additional roadway improvements. These are all what's in the current MTP. Some of these will be occurring much sooner than 2035, such as the Village Parkway extension in the Stone Lock area, and the McGowan Bridge is already in place. That MTP also assumes the Broadway Bridge and also the I Street replacement bridge at C Street, widening of Industrial Boulevard, and various intersection improvements throughout the community. Moving forward now, we fast forward now to 2035, and you can see how traffic volumes, significantly increase in many areas, not surprisingly along Jefferson and in Southport Parkway, Industrial, Harbor Boulevard, Sacramento Avenue, et cetera. Many of our findings in this analysis are not surprising, that we have some traffic challenges in its various areas, particularly along Jefferson Boulevard at various intersections. But what has come out of this analysis that is most critical is it really shows that we will need the Enterprise Bridge in the future. This particular slide, which we're getting to the Enterprise Bridge, what this indicates is actual growth or decrease from 2012 to 2035 on various roadways. And the larger, red definitely show how we will have significant increases in some areas over current conditions in the future. And so I wanted to show this because once we show what things are like with the Enterprise Bridge, there is some substantial differences that show up with that bridge in place. So this is an overall summary. We have various intersection improvements we've identified. Some intersections will work our current policy, some will not in 2035. Again, this is all very broad right now. And then we have some significant areas, and in particular one of note is Lake Washington Boulevard at Southport Parkway. That intersection fails substantially, even with major improvements, some of which have been discussed as ultimately needing a grade separation at that location. So now we're here to sort of where the rubber meets the road, which is the Enterprise Bridge. This is in our current general plan circulation element. It has been something that has been considered many times over the years, but it's not been something that we've really formally programmed, into any actual day-to-day analysis. And what this particular graphic shows is that with the Enterprise Bridge in place, about 20 to 24,000 cars a day actually divert to take that route rather than going on Southport Parkway either to Jefferson or to Industrial Boulevard and Harbor and to the freeway. What this means is that you have, that's about a 1 mile from the intersection of Southport Parkway and Promenade, that's about 1 mile shorter to the freeway. And so if you have at least 20,000 cars diverting that way, that's 20,000, VMT right off the table to begin going for. And then the other positive part about the Enterprise Bridge is that it means that we don't need to widen out Southport Parkway, the Palmanessi Bridge, Industrial, and Harbor to 6 lanes. That would be a substantial improvement that's already programmed in. That's estimated to be a $30 to $40 million improvement by itself. And so if we ultimately do the Enterprise Bridge, which still needs a lot of work to determine its true real-world feasibility, that's a lot of funding that can be redirected to it potentially. And even though this certainly would assume this would be an expensive proposition, there's it can avoid us doing a lot of other things that may be also expensive and potentially undesirable. So this here indicates how, traffic actually decreases on some of those busier roads, such as Southport Parkway and Industrial Boulevard, should the Enterprise Bridge be in place. So this is sort of a summary of what we've identified at this point in time. If we had the Enterprise Bridge in place, again, this is long-term, 2035 type of scenario. We believe it can allow a lot of truck movements to take that bridge rather than moving through town and going through more conflicts, with vehicles. It will significantly help with some of our intersections, specifically Southport Parkway and Lake Washington Boulevard. Obviously, another crossing over the Ship Canal would be of benefit to us. And so at this time tonight, we're seeking the council sort of direction on this, because we very much would like to and plan to assume the presence of the Enterprise Bridge in the general plan EIR and sort of have that be one of its foundations. So going forward, at least for this point in time, we would assume that Enterprise Bridge would be in place by our horizon year. And we'd like to begin the planning for that now, and this is sort of the first step toward that in our general plan EIR going forward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, but there's a few. Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, I think we probably should be looking at the Enterprise Bridge, just because of not only this issue, but the safety issue as well. But you're assuming, you want to assume that the Enterprise Bridge is put in when you do your projections. What about the impact of a streetcar?
Well, we're focusing on traffic, regular vehicle traffic tonight, but the model accounts for all the planned improvements from a transit standpoint too, which also includes streetcar. But the bridge growth seems to be driven primarily by employment growth in Southport, such as in Seaway and Southport Business Park, and then of course additional residential development. There's a lot of both AM and PM movements in and out of Southport, coming both directions. And I'm starting to see that even now, but even more in the future when Seaway goes. So transit is accounted for in the model overall.
So what you're saying is that basically it's the expansion of vehicles miles traveled is unrelated to the streetcar area, the region. Or it's not that impacted, it's more an employment-driven issue.
Well, it's geographical, I would say. I mean, folks going to Seaway for future employment, the streetcar, won't likely, be able to get them there. So it's again, is our unique geography and how we still have a lot of, land to build out in Southport, which means people are leaving Southport and also coming into Southport for employment.
Thank you.
Ms. Endine?
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. I'm actually fine with contemplating this. I think, and I think this is just how it is and what we have to live with. This really assumes the behaviors and the choices all stay the same. They're kind of in 2015, what we would do now, and I suppose we have to plan for that, but I'm hoping, I would love to be able to keep some alternatives, knowing to put this in the plan, but also keep alternatives open as things like driverless cars and other options that could actually make traffic more efficient. I know that could be far out on the horizon, but I just think hopefully as we're going forward with our plan that we're thinking about what we can do to solve circulation and other things in the future. So I just don't want to lose those kinds of options that perhaps will cost less for the citizens of the city in terms of adding efficiency. But I do think, given that we only know what we know now and we can predict what we know now, it seems like we should be contemplating another route. So I suppose that's not a question, it's a comment. Thanks.
Mr. Christoph?
Yeah, David, the number of trips across Palmadesi Bridge now, and then the number of trips that would go across Enterprise, what are those numbers? What is one going to take away from another? Will there be less that goes across the Palmadesi Bridge if Enterprise is in place, or vice versa?
Yes, we estimate that approximately 24,000 cars a day would take Enterprise, which which the vast majority of those would otherwise be going over the Palmet-Essie Bridge. And the key is that it allows us to keep the Palmet-Essie Bridge at 4 lanes rather than widening it out to 6. And then all the upstream improvements, you know, from there.
Right. Okay. I really don't mind, I mean, we've looked at the Enterprise Bridge a number of times in the past. I really don't mind doing that, but, you know, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. But at the same time, I think that if we can extrapolate some good data from the utilization of Enterprise, well then, you know, that's one thing. It's going to need to compete with the possible widening of Jefferson, the possibility of widening of Southport Parkway, and all of those kinds of things to make it work. I mean, Enterprise is a very expensive bridge. It goes, I think, 30 or 40 feet high now in order to accommodate the barge canal and the ships. And it's a very expensive endeavor, and I don't know if the monies that we're going to be spending on Enterprise, if they wouldn't be better spent in some other locations for better traffic management, the movement of goods, and all of the other things. So it's just something that I think you can take a look at, but at the same time, I just sort of have a leery eye, if you will. That's me personally.
All right, so that's most of us, sounds like. I mean, I'm open to it. I think I was one of the skeptics the last time around when we took up the bridge, and we said, okay, you can leave it in the general plan because we're not in an amendment cycle, but it's not really on our list. And we had to make a bunch of other decisions that yes or no on Enterprise was put before us by Ms. Hamilton's predecessor at some point, I forget when it was, 10 years ago, and it was, you need to decide right now whether you're going to do it or not because you have a series of land use decisions before you. And we essentially said, yeah, probably not. So if we're going to return to it, some conditions have changed, and I'm looking at it kind of in the same lens as, I know, you know, assuming I'm still here, I'm going to be the one tasked with going to SACOG or wherever elsewhere to help us find the money for it, and I just want to make sure that, one, it's the right thing for the community, and two, that there's actually a project to be had here. So a couple questions first. One is so the Southport Loop, the Southport Parkway and Village Parkway converging down at the southern end of Southport doesn't really perform its function in the map that you've shown. Right, the original theory of our Southport Framework Plan and the transportation system that supports it now was that not that Jefferson would turn into a bucolic, a bucolic paseo, but that much of the traffic demand on Jefferson would be drawn instead to that loop. That it would be a faster way for folks to get around because it had fewer stops. It wouldn't have stoplights and apartment complexes that it didn't need. It would be a quicker way to get around. And I noticed in the documents the maps that you showed, that doesn't work. But I also noticed that that's partly because we've said that some of the Southport development projects that are going to pay for the completion of those two roads and the connection to them is past the horizon year 2. So part of my curiosity was, are we dealing with a problem of just what the horizon year is? That if we put this out to 2050 and we said, okay, with the full build out of Southport, do those two parkways perform more of the function that they were originally intended, which was to be the primary arterial loop for Southport rather than everything being on Jefferson?
Yeah, most of the traffic analyses we've done over the 10 years, with River Park, Yarborough, the supercumulative, all of those showed that people still went to Jefferson and only tended to divert to the loop roads once Jefferson started to fail significantly. And even though we will now have an interim version of Village Parkway, in place, relatively soon, much sooner than we had ever thought before, the land use mixes in each village, with each having its own neighborhood commercial, sort of has yet to materialize. And so whether if people still wanted to take those parkways, they still end up diverting sometimes, to go to town center, go to the high school, and then you're back on Jefferson again. So it doesn't appear, even on the long term, and even now with a much more robust model, that people divert off Jefferson until it reaches significant congestion. It still is the shortest distance between 2 points, unfortunately.
So one implication of it is that this may not do it either, right? So, because even the Village Parkway, the McGowan Bridge to Riverfront Drive, or to 5th Street, doesn't show on your maps as diverting that much traffic off either. So this is the challenge that transportation modelers always have in this chambers, is their projections have never been right. So before we go on a $100 million chase, I don't want, I mean, we did that with that loop. We've done this with the whole Riverfront piece, always searching for this elusive alternative. This is going to be the thing that's going to provide a release valve off of Jefferson, and it hasn't. And it may not if we don't allow if Jefferson has to fail for the rest of the system to start getting used properly, then maybe Jefferson has to fail. We can't keep building the escape valve so that no one ever makes those adjustments. So I think, to me, that's one of the issues, is that the other investments that we're making, and the whole land use plan for Southport is built around this notion. And if our idea is that folks will just take this other exit, I'm not convinced. And the credibility of our models has been for me at least, it's not that they're wrong. It's just that, I mean, they use the best information possible, but they are just guesses. We have some reason to ask questions about them. The second is, when you talk about taking the money that we would have spent on widening of Industrial and of Lake Washington and the Palm-Medessi Bridge and Southport Parkway, those are, the Southport Parkway, for example, is still an incomplete street, right? It still requires sidewalks and bike lanes, and the whole, a significant amount, even if it's at 4 lanes, still requires money to be spent there. So when you're saying we could shift the money for those projects to Enterprise Boulevard, Enterprise Ridge, are you allowing for making truly complete streets out of the existing ones that we have?
Well, certainly, yeah, that certainly is a notion, and it's primarily industrial and harbor segments that, go to 6 lanes, and which are already quite wide and probably aren't considered to be complete streets. It was just sort of a notion that there are some other improvements that we may not need to do that are already programmed, so that, at least conceptually, at least some of those funds could be moved to a Port Enterprise Bridge, someday.
Yeah, okay, but Southport Parkway is an example. I mean, it was intended to be wider, and when it got wider, it was going to get the sidewalks and the bike lanes that it deserved. And we still are going to do that, even if it stays at the lanes that it is now. And so it's not all the money that we were going to spend on those roads does not become freed up in order to divert to the Enterprise Bridge. The VMT, and this is part of the issue that Councilmember Sandine was raising, and is because VMT is so critical to our ability to get the SACOG priority, right? Because if it detracts from our ability to make the regional air quality analysis, the VMT, it can no longer be a philosophical statement. It has to be real. And so the extent to which opening up a facility like that says to folks, you know what, it's way easier to just drive your car than any other, if driving becomes the best option to go from Southport to UC Davis, instead of UC Davis saying, you know what, we have so many people who live in West Sacramento and Southport who come to our campus that we're going to operate an hourly shuttle ourselves. If that no longer becomes viable because of projects like this, you're actually dramatically increasing the VMT. So simply saying it's a shorter trip isn't enough if it induces more driving in the first place, and we won't get away with it in terms of those traffic models. The models that are being used to assess our climate change emissions and our particulate emissions and our criteria pollutants are more sophisticated than that now, and they will only get more so as all the deadlines on self-imposed deadlines on climate change start to roll around. And so I appreciate that analysis, and I'm not saying we should drop it, but unlike 10 years ago, now we're going to have to demonstrate the whole system of impacts of VMT, and they're not just about the trip length. because if they do make driving and driving solo in many cases the easiest, most preferred option of getting in and out of Southport headed to points west, it's almost certainly going to hurt us in terms of our ability to compete for those regional transportation dollars. Then there's the interchange, the enterprise interchange, because this is only the beginning, right? You know, once we do this, as we experienced with Jefferson, okay, we made Jefferson improvements, and now we've stacked everybody up at the Jefferson interchange on the highway. Enterprise is a challenging. I mean, we already made some improvements, and partly we had to make a promise at the region and at Yolo County Transportation District when we had the enterprise improvements before that this was it. We weren't coming back on enterprise again, and we just got the money for harbor, and we did harbor. We're not coming back again. So the extent to which we stack additional vehicles to enterprise, the interchange, you know, we're gonna have to account for that. That definitely cannot be one where we build this bridge and we come back a year later and say, you know what? Now our big project, we need another $100 million so we can do an interchange improvement at enterprise. Also, the cost, I think the staff report is keyed at $100 million. And unless it's a pedestrian bridge or you're really thinking an at-grade bridge where there's no sailboats going by and no other requirements, it's hard to imagine $100 million being a realistic figure. I mean, it hasn't been for any other bridge. The I Street replacement bridge is going to be in that range, but it doesn't have ships, real ships going by. Only the Delta Queen. So the cost is, we better be awfully realistic about what this is actually going to cost, so that when we do the cost-benefit analysis, we're really honest about it. Then the last thing I was saying, and maybe to me it's the most important one, which is that this analysis treats the land use dimension of this as though that's fixed, and now we have this horrible problem. We have all these trucks that need to get in and out of Southport Business Park into Seaway. What are we going to do? That's happening. That will happen no matter what. Therefore, we must come up with a massive transportation investment in order to solve it. When how many trucks and that sort of thing exist in the northeast quadrant of Southport is largely within our discretion. We don't have a lot of control over Southport Business Park itself, but we have some. We've already seen applications for conversion of parts of the business park to other uses, which we haven't looked kindly on, frankly, but we could, right? So we could be more open to the conversion of some of Southport Business Park to residential if the community wanted to, and we could determine Seaway is not going to be a business park or an industrial park. It's not going to have any uses that are attractors to trucks. We could make that decision. I'm not advocating for any of that right now, because there's reasons why we've made the choices that we've made. All I'm saying is that is the other part of the equation. That is equally before us as much as the bridge is. And so for me, one of the questions is going to be the Enterprise Bridge. If Enterprise Bridge is necessary if you want this land use pattern. And so the question is, do I want the Enterprise Bridge with that land use pattern, or do I want a different land use pattern that doesn't necessarily demand an Enterprise Bridge before it? And so I think, the question that is before us tonight, which is, are we willing to consider it? Yes, but I'm definitely not willing to even give a preliminary yes as an answer to the question itself, because that trade-off, whether we'd be better off simply saying, let's have a different set of land uses in that portion of Southport, and particularly with our own property, or not, I don't think we've sufficiently considered yet. So I think it's a good start. I'm glad you're raising the question, for sure. This is not the kind of thing you want to come back and say 5 years from now, oh, well, we thought in 1998 that you said you didn't want an Enterprise Bridge. I appreciate that it's coming back, but I think all the questions that you're here, the tepid, or the leery openness that Mr. Christoph ID, I think we all share, and we're open to it, but there definitely will have a lot of questions and issues to tease out and work through as we proceed. So. All right. Thank you, Mr. Tilley. That brings us to item 20, which is presentation and discussion of ordinance 15-3, repealing and reenacting municipal code chapter 12.08 regarding special events. Ms. Richardson.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're back again this evening with another presentation and discussion of the special events ordinance. The council had some feedback on the previous ordinance, and we attempted to address some of the concerns and issues that were brought up at our last meeting. One of the main things that the revised ordinance proposes to address some of the concerns expressed by the council was the establishment of entertainment districts in the city. Those are defined areas where it is expected that there will be a high-intensity urban activity and a possibility of a large number of events. And having those entertainment districts established by resolution allows for easy modification to them, or having more than one district in the future, without having to go back through the ordinance process. In the item before you tonight, the first entertainment district that is being proposed is basically the boundaries of map in the staff report, but the boundaries basically run north-south from C Street to the Barge Canal and east-west from the river to 5th Street. And that is the area that we would be proposing for the first entertainment district. The basic difference there would be the time limits for events. The council had expressed some concern about being too stringent in some areas for times, but also still having respect for other areas of the city where high-intensity events weren't planned. So the ordinance calls for time limits in the entertainment districts of 10 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday and midnight on Friday and Saturday nights. And then in other areas of the cities, the time limits for noise would be 10 p.m. 7 days a week. There's a provision for an exception on July 4th and also on New Year's Eve. There were a couple other issues the council had relative to other impacts besides noise. They mentioned dust, lighting, traffic, road closures, things like that were mentioned as possible issues. So the ordinance has been revised to have the applicant consider that, outline those impacts in their permit application, and then they will also be factors considered in the permit conditions. There was a little bit of a discussion regarding the number of allowable events in areas or venues that were primarily intended for those uses. The original ordinance that was proposed to you limited those events to 6 per year. We had done, the Director of Community Development had done an extensive listserv about all the different elements of special event ordinances, and a lot of them didn't even have a provision, or were very limited in what how they address this. The entire listserv isn't attached. We attempted to pull out some of the jurisdictions that did have some of those. What we're proposing now is having it be 12 events per year, which would be one per month, and then an event is can be up to a 3-day duration, except for seasonal events, which could be up to 30 days. So we felt this was a fair balance of trying to allowing for a significant number of events without being too impactful to some of the residents around there. The council also expressed some concerns about allowing the special events administrator to approve or waive fees and having a special budget allocation within a policy for that. So the ordinance that's before you tonight changes those provisions that still has the council adopting a policy that the SEA would review in relation to fee waivers, but the eventual granting of those waivers or reduction in the fees would be by the council. Let's see what else we have here. The other thing, other item, I think was Councilmember Johannesson was concerned about the submittal timelines that we had in the original ordinance, and upon review of the matrices, ours were a little excessive, so we did adjust those downward for each type of event. So again, those were some of the adjustments that we made based on the feedback from the council. We'll be happy to answer any questions for you.
Questions from the council at this time? All right, we do have one request to speak on the item by Mr. Lowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. William Lowell, West Sacramento, for the record. This business of we needed, as they say, needed administrative updates, and it addresses issues such as amplified sound. Well, I still have a problem. I hate to say it over again, but like at the beginning of the meeting, our air conditioning was making more noise or was louder than your voice, and I had a hard time hearing it, so why can't we amplify the sound from your speaker? And why isn't the city council meetings just as important as special events? And why isn't City Hall just as important as these so-called certain zones? So effective communication means being able to hear what is being said by our leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowell. All right, returning to the council, Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, Carol, is there a notice radius in this draft? I'm seeing in the schedule of the different cities and the number of days of notice, the cost of, varying the cost of security, that type of thing. And there's a category notice radius. And we've got for West Sacramento, we don't have any notice radius. And didn't we?
We didn't have any notice radius in there because the types of events might vary, and that might depend on how far out you go. I mean, we could put in a minimum notice, but I think we were trying to keep some flexibility in the notice, just based on the type of event.
So how would the applicant know? It would be one of the requirements.
That would be one of the requirements that would be discussed with that as a permit condition.
Do you have like a range, an idea of how you
I think
would?
when we did TBD, we did 500 feet.
Okay. All right,
So that would probably be a minimum.
right.
Yeah, I keyed on that as well, actually, maybe for the opposite reason, but not really, which is that this is, to me, this is like the amplified sound issue, that in an entertainment district, it is both unnecessary and kind of annoying to be. I don't want to get a notice every day that there's going to be yet another concert happening down the street or whatever. That is, in addition to the noise level, that sort of notice is no longer becomes. It becomes kind of ridiculous and not helpful. So thinking about the differences about what the expectations are in the different zones, I think would be useful to think about. Because in other situations, it's absolutely appropriate for there to be notice when there's the single event that ever happens. Folks would want to and would deserve to know that's happening. But that's a difference in place. Part of the challenge is that this survey of all these other cities, for the vast majority of which are suburban in nature, and so they're useful in thinking about our traditional events ordinance, special events ordinance. So they're useful for a large 80% of the 90% of the city, but they're not good models for how to deal with the entertainment districts. And so just as we look at the surveys that's been done, really other than Sacramento, none of the rest of them, I mean, Vacaville and Dublin and places like they're not hotbeds of lively entertainment districts of the kind that we're trying to anticipate in the policy. So in that respect, the other piece of that issue is the entertainment district. I know we're not considering the specific boundaries, but the map that we have here does not include the place where we actually have a lot of these. We have events right here in the front of City Hall, and this is also one of those districts, all right, that we're creating. In some ways, it's just as much as Washington Square, for example. I think it might be useful to get to a point where we've got, even a couple categories of entertainment districts. We're not there yet. There's no reason to overcomplicate it. But the Grand Gateway and the work that we're doing in Civic Center, I think, implies that this is that pocket of the city, as it is with some of the other things we've done on parking and other issues, that's just as much in this kind of urban pocket, and kind of modern urban pocket that we're talking about, where the populating of it is really just now beginning at a significant scale. So as the resolution comes back, if we pass the ordinance, I'd suggest that you think about broadening the zone inland at the CBD level itself. And one other comment I thought I found it. All right, are there other questions or comments? Mr. Christoph?
Just a comment, and I think that I don't know how you would do it, but I think some allowances may need to be made, because I do think one of the facilities that is being constructed real soon, the barn, has the potential to have, we'll say, music every night for many, many nights in a row. And so, and I don't know if a new permit for each one, I don't know how you would do that, but I think that.
The barn has its own special use permit with its own guidelines for a lot of the things that are in the special event permit ordinance. And there is a provision in the ordinance that says if you have a use permit that addresses things and the ordinance that addresses the same items and there's a conflict, the use permit would prevail.
Okay,
So-
that might work. Okay. Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, was that language, just looking at the ordinance that's attached, was it moved? Because in the permit conditions section, it's crossed out.
I think we
Maybe
did, I
just,
think
maybe
we
just
did
gonna
move
shift to
it.
some other location, but I
Yeah.
didn't see it, so. Oh, it's on the same page later on. Okay, gotcha. Okay. Ms. Andine?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Carol, I just want to thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you for your help.
for the work on this. After our last meeting with all of our commentary and input and questions and ideas, I actually wasn't expecting to see it back so quickly, so thank you for the hard work. And I actually can see that you've taken some of our ideas, and especially regarding the entertainment district, and then thinking about the special events that are maybe in other zones. So I really, really appreciate the work.
Thank you.
All right, any further comments or discussion? Wait, this is still only a workshop? God, this is the 20th time we've talked about this. All right, so.
Next time you see it, it'll be a first reading.
This will be returning for
hopefully.
first reading
Yeah.
at a
Then eventually we'll
upcoming
have the
meeting.
resolutions for the.
All right, thank you,
the
Mr.
district.
Richardson. Thanks for all
Thank
the
you.
staff work on this. All right, item 21 is consideration of a workshop regarding the city's draft water conservation plan and authorization to implement associated actions to support water conservation. Ms. Benner?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. As I'm sure you're all well aware, the State Water Resource Control Board adopted emergency drought regulations just last night that will impose additional water use restrictions and require water providers such as the city of Sacramento to reach specific reduction goals. They use the residential gallons per capita day figure to establish those goals for each water provider. Cities, RPG City as we call it, is setting us at the tier requiring a 28% reduction, which means we'll have to reduce our water use between June 2015 through February 2016 by 28% as compared to that same period in 2013. These regulations will go into effect on June 1st of this year, and in anticipation of those regulations going into effect and to attempt to get ahead of the curve, city staff has established a drought task force with other city departments and our outside partners like the school district and large water users, and we've drafted a water conservation plan. That draft plan, which is included in your packet this evening, addresses some key components that would be necessary to have or meet the reductions needed in order to meet the state goals. Currently, our efforts include implementation of our Stage 2 of our water shortage contingency plan. That water shortage contingency plan was approved in 2011 when the City Council adopted our urban water management plan. So it's something that's been in place for quite some time. We implemented Stage 2, which included outdoor watering restrictions such as not applying water to hardscapes like street, sidewalks, and buildings, and prohibiting water from running off into the gutter. And those are similar to the state's restrictions. Our Stage 2 also includes a limit on 3 days per week watering. Since we've implemented that plan in 2014, we've averaged about 18% reduction in 14 as compared to 2013. It's obvious that to get to 28%, more is needed. And it's well known that at this point that the largest reductions are found through outdoor watering restrictions, which we could accomplish by implementing Stage 3 of our water shortage contingency plan, because it currently sets a 1 day per week watering restriction. Some other components of Stage 3 would include a prohibition on filling new pools or refilling drained existing pools, and also would prohibit outdoor fountains or decorative water features that use potable water regardless of whether they have a recirculating pump. And that is one thing to note that's different than the state regulations. It still allows the potable water use in an outdoor fountain as long as there's a recirculating system. The plan to move to stage 2 would be the next logical step in the progress, and would also be the quickest to implement since it could be implemented under the city manager's authority. However, council does have the option of adopting some other kind of a combination or modified version. You could perhaps modify stage 2 to be more stringent or modify stage 3 to be less stringent. Either of those could be accomplished by council resolution, which staff could bring back to council at the May 20th meeting for consideration. In our draft conservation plan, we've also outlined increased outreach efforts that would be necessary in order to reach these reduction goals. Those outreach efforts would require significant staff effort. The level of effort required for a robust, successful water conservation program is currently not something that we can support in our current staffing resources in the Environmental Services Division. So we've identified a funding source in the Water Enterprise Fund that could fund a limited term position that would be dedicated to the conservation programs and all of the things we listed in our plan to get us to that 28% reduction. We are requesting that council approve addition of that position to the authorized position list and the approval to use that funding source for that position. We're also asking for council feedback on the draft plan that we presented tonight and direction on how to proceed with outdoor water restrictions in our water shortage contingency plan. That basically concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I suspect will be quite a lot of discussion on this item.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fenner. Are there questions?
Yeah,
Christoph.
The state said the city of West Sacramento should reduce 28%?
Correct.
Did the state take into consideration the food processing industry that West Sacramento has that requires quite a bit of water?
They have not taken that into consideration in the sense that we won't be able to back out those figures from our total production reduction. So they'll just look at the number of acre feet we produce as compared to 2013, regardless of its source. But the Water Board did say that cities such as West Sacramento, they would work with us directly if we get to the point where, we've done everything we can and we're as close as possible, but we just can't get there because of, our large food base. They'll work with us directly on that.
Is there a different formula for ag than there is for urban?
No, I think there is an exemption for water providers that have more than 20% of their water production going to commercial agriculture, so they can back out that figure, but I'm not sure.
Well, we don't have that much here in West Sacramento, but we do have some ag.
Correct.
And I was wondering if those ag gallons, if there's a different formula, if those ag gallons of water could be backed out.
It's my understanding that if their water is provided by us as a city water provider, it's part of our total production number.
Well, they might be on wells. I'm not sure.
I think some of them could be, I'm not 100% sure, but if they are supplied by us, then they would be part of our numbers.
Okay, and if they're for agricultural uses, we don't get to back that out?
That's correct, that's my understanding.
Okay. I thought we might. Okay.
Mr. Johansson.
Yeah, if we jump up to stage 3, it looks like the main changes are going to be 1 day a week watering. And then we have this category of swimming pools and fountains. So how are other cities doing that? I mean, if there's a prohibition now against topping off a swimming pool, then basically the swimming pools are going to become big holes, and there's going to be a safety issue there. Could be mosquito issues there. Are other cities having a policy of allowing top-ups, or, I can see, draining the pool and refilling it, but what are other cities doing about that type of thing?
Well, the intent of that prohibition is not to disallow keeping your water levels. It's just filling a brand-new pool or draining and refilling your pool.
Okay, it doesn't say, it says you cannot fill or refill with potable water. I mean, just the schedule here, but when, I
Yeah,
guess
the
when you get
intent of
ordinance.
that is refilling of an empty pool.
Right, right. Same thing with any kind of, fountains or things like that,
Right.
recirculating.
In other jurisdictions, every city has a different stage and different state, or different restrictions within their stage. So other cities, their stage 3 may not include that prohibition, and others do. So it varies widely across the region.
Do we have an idea what the, evaporation is one thing, I guess, with pools, but it's also people splashing the water out. How like 20 square feet of pool service versus 20 square feet of lawn, what's the difference in 1 day a week watering of lawn versus keeping a pool filled? I mean, I don't have a feeling for, if it's material or not. Or because, if it's just, it's drastically different than, less than, maintaining lawn. There seems to be, the trade-off would be to, allow the pools to be maintained. But with this, I don't really have any information, no.
There are, some studies have been done that say that square foot comparisons of regular watering of turf compared to a pool are about equal. But if you're comparing a pool to someone that's already reduced watering, I think that would still be less water use than a pool would require. And I think it's about an inch of evaporation a week on average in the summer months from a pool.
Okay.
Cindy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to say that I think the only way we can move forward and have water reduction is with more attention and staff time. And you and I have had conversations about outreach and education and upgrading websites and a lot of things. And I have to say, I think that the creativity to actually come up with a funding source that's actually from water reduction and the contract allotment, I have to say, I'm really grateful that I really don't think we could move forward. We could say we're instituting stage 3 or stage 4, and then I think we wouldn't be able to follow through and actually reach out to residents and again, do all the things. There'll be lots of enforcement. There'll be folks having to go through like walk through the neighborhoods and knock on doors. I mean, that is very, very staff intensive. So I think this can only work if we move forward by having more staff, and I really appreciate the creativity that's been put into the thought to get us there. In terms of the stage, we have to reduce. We have to meet that 28%, and I think that the city came up with this plan years ago. I think we can follow. I think we can follow it, and we may have to reconsider if we're not hitting the reduction targets to come up with even some other considerations as we move forward through this drought.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. In terms of this, what are other jurisdictions doing? Question. I'm interested just in a more general sense. Part of the challenge on some of these things is the details are hard to comprehend, but they become really hard to comprehend if it's different here than it is in Sacramento, than it is in Woodland, and you're like, okay, well, I know I'm allowed to water, but it can't be potable water unless it's recirculated, but not if your jurisdiction's name starts with a W and it's Tuesday, and it just gets to be so, then it's hard to comply when you don't know what the rules are. So that, like, as an example, this difference between us and the state on recirculation of ponds, for example, is that, what's the predominant practice in our own region or even across the river, do you know?
Like I said, there has been many attempts for all of us to get on the same page with our stages and what the percent reductions are associated with them and what the associated restrictions are. So far, it seems like more jurisdictions or water providers are just focusing more on their outdoor watering schedule as opposed to the pools and fountains and things of that nature. They're asking people not to use them or not to, refill, but they're not making it mandatory. So it just varies. I mean, at the time of our adoption, that was what we chose to place in stage 3. And like I mentioned, it is a possibility that we could temporarily amend our water shortage contingency plan by council resolution to make stage 3 less restrictive, or maybe just make stage 2 more restrictive by reducing the days per week or some other variation like that.
Well, I'm supportive of going to stage 3 and going there full bore. I mean, there's the issues from the State Water Board that we need to respond to, but fundamentally the governor is right, the State Water Board is right. We're in a drought and it's severe and we don't know when it's going to end. And although we have the right to take water from the river, contracted for generations. We still have, we're still California, so we have to contribute to the overall solution. So I support, moving forward. I don't really want to relax the stage 3 standards in any way. I'm just trying to figure out how we can be the most effective at making compliance easy, because we have plenty of residents and businesses and landowners. They want to help. They want to do the right thing. They're just not really sure what it is. I think last year there was a lot of great general education around drought response by all the jurisdictions and water purveyors and others. But as we get down to brass tacks now we have to take our conservation efforts up by 50%, by more than 50% than we were last year. We're going to have to help our residents, businesses, really refine what they were doing, because they already know the basics. And we need to keep doing those and doing that more. But now they've got to figure out, okay, how do I save the next ounce? In order to really make a difference. So if we have differences between other places in the region, we need to make sure we're highlighting those so that folks know it's different here. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be we're raising the bar on what can be accomplished in terms of water conservation. So no recirculating ponds. That's part of what it amounts to what it means to be the best in water conservation or whatever. But so we should be pushing on that. But understand that it is confusing for residents, or at least it has been, and we should try to do what we can to make it simpler. What's for the State Water Board regulations? What's the penalties at the city level if we don't hit the 28%?
They're set at $10,000 per day. That's how the regulation is written.
Okay, and then I noticed in the regulations there separate requirements for water for commercial, industrial, and institutional properties? Still?
The way they've set, what they're allowing, one of the changes between the draft regulation and what they adopted last night is they're allowing jurisdictions to meet the reductions in the way we see fit best or see fit. So we're not requiring each sector to cut by 28%. They're providing us with the flexibility to reach that 28% however we see fit.
So the language that was in the text that you gave us was at the 25% target. It wasn't tier. It didn't look like it was tier dependent. Maybe it was.
There are some things. Let me see.
It just so if you look at on the proposed text of the emergency regulation on page 2, right in the center at subdivision C, it says immediately all commercial, industrial, and institutional properties that use a water supply, any part of which is from a source other than us. Are we the other than us?
No, I think it's referring to other than the urban supply.
Okay, so it's
we are the.
Okay, so we are the other then.
Right.
We are the other in that regard. Okay, gotcha. So on recycled, gray water, other repurposed water, non-potable water, these are strategies mainly about just using less water, period. Are you proposing or exploring any additional strategies around the use of non-potable water, or the availability of non-potable water?
We have done workshops in the past for gray water systems. Our building department does allow for permitting of a gray water system. Some jurisdictions don't. So as part of our outreach plan, we would encourage residents to explore that. As far as recycled water goes, there aren't really any sources available to us. For example, there's a wastewater treatment plants that have recycled water they can use for irrigation. At this time, we don't really have a method of getting that water back to us. We're also doing rain barrel workshops, trying to encourage people to use rainwater when we do get some rain to water their properties.
So I'd understood that that Regional Sanitation District, which has been using recycled water, but principally in Elk Grove, because Elk Grove is where the plant is now wants to support efforts to try to directly provide recycled water throughout more of its service area. Are we in any of those conversations about the potential of bringing a non-trivial amount of recycled water from the regional plant to places beyond Elk Grove like us, or?
No, it's my understanding, the closest we could get right now is the mall, Capitol Mall. And I think that there's a delivery system that Sac Regional has that can get there. I don't know if I don't think, and I will find out next Thursday, but I don't think that regional sand comes across the river for a system that can utilize reused water. So, but I'll find out next Thursday because we do have a meeting coming up. Not tomorrow, the following week.
Okay, but generally, I'm supportive of this. You know, the Bee had an editorial yesterday on, or maybe it was today, on the Cash for Grass programs and all that. I personally, actually, I'm not a fan of those. I think that the nudge research, you know, at Harvard, some of the psychological research indicates that when you have this kind of movement level activity that folks need to engage in for a larger social cause, that monetizing it highly as an incentive program, a financial incentive program with small fiscal incentives, actually reduces participation once people start to think of it as, am I making enough money off of it? And you can see this actually in Sacramento with people, instead of thinking I'm converting my grass into some drought appropriate landscape, instead of thinking I'm doing this because I'm trying to fight the drought, then they're thinking, well, let's see, the city of Sacramento, I can get 50 cents a square foot for doing this. So, okay, is it going to pay off for me to do it? And so it totally changes the way that you think about whether you're doing it for the cause and for the state and for, for your community, and it becomes a monetary condition. And in every case, 50 cents a square foot is not going to pay for it. So it doesn't so they get much less uptake than you might have gotten if you just didn't provide a subsidy at all. So, the drought was not created by government, and all of us as a community, as a state, have to solve it together. It's not simply on government to figure out how to either make us or pay us in order to accomplish that. It's particularly compounded because, as the Bee also reported, us and all the other water agencies in the state we depend on the revenue from the delivery of water to our customers in order to pay for that water infrastructure. And so the result of the reduced water usage that we are trying to achieve is a significant economic cost to the water districts. $500 million, I think, was the estimate statewide. And so the idea that's both in the editorial and that I've certainly heard, and I'm sure members of the council have from residents as well, is, well, you're saving money on water, therefore you should rebate it to us so that we can get cash for grass and swap out our well lines. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. The water system, the pipes are still there and they have to be maintained and replaced. The water still has to be cleaned at the same. I mean, all the stuff that we spend on water still has to be spent. And we have significantly less revenue as usage goes down. And so, as I've certainly been responding back. Folks, please don't wait for a government subsidy program to come out in order to convert, your lawn to some other use. And it's a crisis that all of us have to solve. The city is already doing its part. The city in our existing plan, and now with a stretch goal that's identified by the city manager and the staff now of reducing water usage by 50%, is a huge step, and it's a very strong sign of city leadership in trying to solve this challenge. But it isn't as though that we don't have any spare dollars to pay everybody else to do their part as well. Everyone's going to have to do something to make it happen. And the same thing is true on our business and in our industrial community. And they need to hear that message. We will do everything we possibly can to protect the economic integrity of our industrial users, particularly the food users, for whom water isn't just an incidental use. But our case will be that much stronger if we're able to maximize the amount of conservation that we do achieve. It's not so. Our continued fighting to make sure that the food processors and the other food companies that we depend on and that depend on us and that are here because of our water, the quality and the supply of our water, we're committed to protecting them. But they and every other industrial user in the city needs to do their the best and the most that they can as well, so that we can hit that goal. So. I think this is it's good staff work, and I know our public works director was at the State Board with a sword the other day, fighting on the industrial water users piece. And the State Board is sympathetic on industrial water users, I think, as you said. But they've indicated they can't just give a pass to the whole industry, and that's fair. At the same time, it would not be fair if a food processing company for which water is an essential part of the food that is being created can only reduce their water usage by, say, 15%, and that's with a massive effort. But if they can reduce their water usage by 15%, if the sum total of that means that our residents have to reduce their water usage by 35 or 40% compared to residents of bedroom communities that add no jobs or economic inputs to the region, are only faced with a 25% reduction, it's not fair. And it's also a big environmental justice and social justice issue, and we've made that case to the state as well. And so we're going to keep fighting the regulatory fights that we need to have, but at the same time, actions like this are critical so that we do our part and continue to maximize the level of water conservation that we demonstrate in terms of as the city, as a city government, and as a community as a whole. We've done a great job last year, and if anybody's going to be able to turn it up, it's going to have to be West Sacramentans. So, Mr. Christoph?
Yeah,
Mr. Johannesson?
couple things. What's the next rule? In other words, you're going to come away with some rules and whatever they are. What's the next one that we can put into our utility bill and the public then will know what to do or what not to do? I'm still getting calls, I'd say a couple every week. On what days can I water, Billy? What days? And so, you tell them it's the Wednesday or the Friday and the Sunday or whatever it may be. And I know that we sent out something early on. People didn't cut it up and put it on their fridge, or they didn't do whatever they do with the little tag that they did in our utility bill 5 months ago, and they forgot. And so I think the education is going to be an important part of all of this. And if there is a new rule that comes down, like we'll say watering once a week, for instance, and you can water either on Saturday or you can water on Sunday. And, if it's simple and if that's what the rule is going to be, then I think we need to articulate that to the community. And really, one of the best ways to do that is through the utility billing. I think people, they pay attention a little bit more, especially now that we're in a drought. And they pay attention a little bit more to some of those kinds of things.
Mr. Johannesson?
Yeah, maybe just to augment Councilmember Christoph's comments. I think we mentioned in the past about putting water usage on utility bills. Where are we on that?
I know they are working on that. I don't recall where, maybe Dennis can help me with this. Our utility billing manager has been working with staff on that and working with Springbrook, the software program, to make sure that they can, right now we do have a basic bar graph on there that shows their usage. So they're trying to add in more details. The 1 CCF is 748 gallons, and then actually place numbers on there so someone can actually see how many gallons they're using as opposed to just a bar graph. But I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I know on my.
We're working on it, and we can do it. It's in the works.
Recent bill I saw, it had nothing, it was just a blank space, so it had no information on it.
And you have a meter?
Yeah, I really cut back, that's right.
Well, if you don't have a meter at your house, it won't show any data.
New subdivisions? Well, that was the other question, is the status of metering. I thought that we were metered out there, but,
You might be metered, but it's not plugged in and operating because it's not 100% city.
If I may add to that,
Yeah.
the first question about displaying that information on the utility bill, we are looking at that. We have the data for the metered customers. We have the data. It's just a matter of displaying that into the utility bill. We are working on that. My staff has told me that it will be done within a month or so. So that takes care of the first
okay,
question.
all right. And then the next question was the status of installing meters throughout?
Okay, so the status of installing meters, we are making progress. We are trying to expedite as much as possible. We have the funding we need. It's just a matter of getting the project done. So our current schedule is by end of 2018 that will be done, but we are trying to expedite it if possible.
Do you know what percentage are metered right now, residences?
I think of the 12,900 residences, we have about 8,900 already metered,
All right.
roughly.
Yeah, so I think, the messaging is going to be different depending on whether you have a meter or not, because obviously if you're not metered, you're not going to get information in your bill, and you have no idea how much water you're using.
Right.
So the messaging there on how to conserve, the 3-minute showers and things like that, I think are going to be important. But the others, I think just the incentive of having a number on your bill and saying, if it's a 30% reduction we're looking at, or 35 in the summer, your usage is such and such, here's what you need to conserve, here's how you can get that extra 5%. That's really going to help people, because I know it is confusing, for people, and not only just when you can water, but, what really are the big areas where you can conserve.
Definitely, we have to increase our outreach and education component of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, it shows on my utility bill in the way that you say, I don't really know what the number stands for. It's a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, something like that. But so it's telling me up or down. That's basically all I can get from that bar graph, which is not unhelpful. But I don't know what the number translates to. So even more than the gallons per day, I think Mr. Johannessen's suggestion is actually much more useful, which is, this is how many, and in order for you to get to this target, that's the equivalent of 1 day of watering an average lawn or something. You don't have to get too detailed, but it just gives you some way. This is an average, this is an average shower, this is an average pool, or whatever, just so you get some sense of how to translate those numbers into the stuff that you actually live in day to day. So I know you're working on trying to improve this. It just gets iteratively better. It will help folks who want to do something and they want to do more, but just want the tools to make that effective. Mr. Christoph?
One more question I have, and that is, in the near horizon, in the near future, we've got major projects that are, I'm not going to say breaking ground, but they're getting very close to entitlements. They're getting very close to starting to turn some dirt. To put in a major project like that takes a lot of water. Where do we get that water, and are they charged? And how are they charged so that the water use doesn't really go against the city, so to speak?
It will go against the city because it is a part of this water that we distributed in the system. So if we are taking, whether it is for firefighting or for permitted uses, anything that we draw out of that system will be counted against that, our water usage.
Okay.
So,
Let's hope-
and hopefully that construction use will not be a high amount when compared to the big picture, the total usage.
So stage 4, which is no outdoor watering at all, it's no new connections to the water system, no flushing the fire hydrants, and those are the major ones. But those are big. Those are pretty big items. Do we have a trigger for stage 4?
Stage 4 would be triggered by a cutback in our water availability. And it would typically be triggered if our water supply was cut by 50% or greater. And so that would be the total water supply we have through our contracts if they cut it back.
So what's happening with the 28% cut is not a cut in our water supply, though. It's a different. The
Right,
state
so yeah,
doesn't-
the triggering mechanism is a cut in the water supply we have available to us through our water contracts. The reduction is just our effort to reduce the amount of water we're producing.
Right. So the authority to move to stage 3 is stage 3 based on water supply? Because this is not water supply. This is we're
It is
reducing
based, it
water
can be
usage.
triggered by water supply. A lot of this is driven by drought declarations. The stage 3 trigger would have been a 30 to 40% cut in our available water supply, which we're already at that point. So we could have triggered a stage 3 previously.
So are, based on reductions in our entitlements to take water, not this 28%
Correct.
reduction target? Okay. So if the state were to come back and say, we're changing your, after 6 months, it's so severe now, we're taking your 28% up to 55%, that does not trigger stage 4, right?
I would expect that if the state was at that point where they wanted us to cut by 55%, we would have already seen some significant cutbacks in our available water supply. I mean, that, they kind of work in tandem. You know, as the state drought situation worsens, we get additional cutbacks from our, you know, our CVP contract, or Central Valley Project, and our appropriative rights. They respond to that.
Yeah, as we start to think about these policies in a more permanent way, 18 months ago, the notion that the state would be aggressively regulating usage not through the mechanism of supply would have been a surprise, and so that's why our stages are not written that way. But that maybe when we have a free moment, we ought to adapt the policies that we have to be responsive to both water supply or restrictions on usage, because they are different, and it's an important difference. Even when we're talking to potential companies that want to move here or folks that want to invest here, the difference between supply and the temporary usage restrictions are still they still make a great deal of difference. But the policy should encompass both.
The Urban Water Management Plan is scheduled for revisions in adoption in 2016, and that this is an area we were going to spend a lot of time revising.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. All right. Any other feedback on this item? All right, then the recommendation is to implement stage 3 and to add the authorized position and the appropriation to support it. Is there a motion? Moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Ms. Indy.
Second.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. All right, that brings us to item 22, which is presentation and discussion regarding alterations to landscape planter strips in the public right-of-way. We're now at stage 3, so 1 day of watering a week.
1 day of watering a week. Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's
That needs to
if
be
you are at home watching
articulated.
this on television, and you haven't heard us describe the specific
That's right.
stage 3 measures. The key ones are that outdoor watering will now be limited to 1 day per week. If your house number ends with an odd number, which includes for city, the number 0 for city government purposes only is defined as an even number. But if your house ends with a number that's an odd, then you can irrigate on Saturdays. You can water on Sundays. If your house ends in an even number, there's no outdoor irrigation or watering allowed between Mondays and Friday. The use of potable waters we've talked about to fill or refill swimming pools or ponds or lakes is prohibited, and the use of potable water in ornamental fountains or ponds is prohibited, along with a suite of other measures that have been in place since we triggered stage 2 last year. All right, anyway, back to item 22 on landscape planter strips in the public right-of-way. Mr. Hardy?
Mayor and members of the council, I'm Justin Hardy with the Community Development Department, the senior planner. Parlaying from the previous item, this item here is seeking council comments and direction regarding staff's proposed design guidelines for the process of modification for landscape planter strips by homeowners. Recently, we've had an increase in requests to modify them by removing turf from the separator planter strips due to drainage problems created by drainage issues, increasing muddy areas, and the inability to drain. As the elevated pads for homes are watered, all that water trickles down, and the planter strips are the lowest area, and so the concentrated water from overwatering above combination with watering the planter strips themselves has created some areas where it just stays moist for extended periods of time, or in some cases almost indefinitely. That is also combined with the inability to absorb due to certain soil types in different areas of the city. Currently, the planter strips contain a mixture of planted street trees as required in Southport framework plan specifically, and in most cases turf was planted along with those. This area historically, with a few exceptions, has been maintained by adjacent property owners, even though it's within the public right-of-way area. The street trees are still to be maintained by the city through funding mechanisms that have been established and not proposed to be modified as part of this policy. The policy before you is twofold by providing a modification that the residents are requesting and also provides the ability for reduction of water usage due to the attached low water usage plant list that we've provided. The attached planter list is also available locally in town at most of the stores that carry vegetation. The guideline for is included in the report. It contains the general policy guidelines on landscape and hardscape and planter strips, including direction on what may or may not be planted or constructed. Some of the folks have requested to basically pave over the entire area, which would give us the inability to effectively deal with utilities if needed. We recommend the city's review and inspection of the strips modifications via the encroachment permit process. This process also ensures that utilities in the right-of-way aren't damaged upon filing the permit, or curbs being damaged as well. This policy was brought forth both between the Planning Commission and the newly formed Environmental Utilities Commissions. Their review concerned really mainly regarding the cost that is recurred through the encroachment process, mainly the deposit. Even though it is refunded upon completion, it may take a month or greater for that to be returned. The fees are discussed in their entirety and broken down within the report. That concludes my report. If there are any questions of staff, Wendy Williams and myself from Development Engineering is also here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, I think this, I think we got to be careful with this. A lot of the newer subdivisions, this strip is irrigated by the same strip that irrigates the rest of the area. To have, even being able to having to submit a site plan when we're trying to get people to convert to drought-tolerant plants, there's got to be a simpler way to do this. Like, just, does your plan such and such? Does your plan no, 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 no? Okay, go ahead and do it. I just think if you make it too onerous, people aren't. I don't know how they're going to deal with these strips. And the fee now is what is it, $133, or what are you proposing the fee's going to be?
The current fee for some alteration up to $650. The non-refundable fee on that would be $103.20.
We see that's a lot of money. I mean, they're already, so that's going to be the issue, because I think, we're talking about not providing any cash for grass, but, this fee is going to be an issue for a lot of people, and they're going to want to try and do the right thing, and they're going to want to, if you're going to try and xeriscape your front, for example, what are you going to do with that strip? So, I just think the regulatory burden, there's got to be some middle ground here. The fee, I think, is an issue, and just making it real simple for people to do things that are common sense. You understand, you're not going to put a big statue or block, or, the kind of the hardscape that you're talking about. I think that's fine, but you can do that with the checkbox. Are you putting in hardscape? Hardscape is, is like such and such. Just real simple for people to do, because we're starting to see more and more people trying to convert their lawns to zero escape, and in most of the new subdivisions, they've got that strip. And there's even confusion about the trees, to be frank. Those are my comments. I think we've got to make it simple for people.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe a two-track approach could work, where one option is the process that you've articulated here, that's criteria-based, that is based on, tell us what you want to do, and we'll evaluate it based on all of these criteria. Because this makes sense depending on the right conditions and all of that. But if we sort of almost pre-permitted certain, 2 or 3 or 4, standard things that okay, if you're going to do one of these 3 or 4 things, then you need to, file a form with us that notifies us that you're doing it, that you're taking legal and financial responsibility for it, and that you're doing only these things. And here's an example, and here's a guidebook, and Dina Kirtley will come out and help you if you, she'll do a workshop or, whatever. But where there's a couple of, prepackaged turnkey things that if you do exactly that to the specification and nothing more than that, then it's done and it's expedited, and all you do is, let it, you have to file the appropriate legal stuff with us, so that with documentation of who is responsible for it. If you want to do anything else, then you have this process to go through, because this is going to require, a customized solution is going to require a customized review and inspection and everything by us. And therefore, it's going to be more onerous. But for some folks, they may say, look, if I want it to look exactly like what we're doing, all the neighbors are doing, this treatment to their former lawns, and then we want it to look like that, it doesn't match what the city's, prepackaged turnkey things are, okay, fine, in that case, go ahead and propose something. But you don't have to, I guess, to me is the point. So if we could create two track options, it might solve the problem that Mr. Johannesson, I think, is very appropriately pointing out. While also, making sure that it's just not Wild West and people aren't just out there with shovels, tearing up the key infrastructure underneath. Ms. Sandy?
I think that's a great idea to actually have the 2 tracks. I think it still is important for folks to know that it is an encroachment. I mean, I do think we still have to go through a permitting process, because it can't be Wild West. I do think having something that was somewhat standard or some options also, I mean, I think one of the ideas is kind of integrity. When you have plenty of water, is to just kind of be driving down this place with a lot of greenery. And so I think if it's all over the place, I do think that could be potentially problematic for a neighborhood as well. So I think having an easy option, A, B, C, and then if you want to do something else, I do think we do need to make sure that we are covering costs, and folks, very demanding of the department, as you know, when they want to do a building project, they want the attention, or they want something right away, and that they should expect service. So I also do think we do need to take that into consideration as well. But I think this would help folks feel like they're helping with even a drought or the issue, that they're doing something about it.
Other comments? All right, is that sufficient feedback?
One thing I would say is that in the cases that we've had prior to this policy, normally what we do is work with the homeowners. If we have a site plan in the street file, in the folder for their home, we will help them try to craft a site plan. It's not, we try to make it as easy as possible. We ask them what they want to do, kind of show them how it might be helpful to show it on the site plan, and try to help them in any way with that while still meeting the regulations that we have. So we do try to help them that way.
So, Randy, I was just asking, do you have enough feedback from us? You don't need to respond to every comment that has been raised. Because we've reached the end of any discussion, so it's in a workshop. If there are any outstanding questions that you needed answered from the council in order to proceed to the next stage of work. Mr. Johansson?
Yeah, I think, when I like the idea of having a 2-track system, but when you're talking about the easy track, I think the idea would be to have a track where you're not really involved. I mean, there may be an inspection, but so you could justify either having no fee or very, very low fee. And so I really appreciate the staff wanting to help people, but the fact is that costs money, and that's probably for some of the more elaborate plans. But what I think this 2-track system would look like is you'd have a number of options that you're going to be limited, but if you check that, maybe you guys will drive by and just check it off, and that'll be it. So yeah, it conforms that and you're done. So I mean, that would be kind of the extent of, even if you may not even do that. But, keep it very, very simple for the, kind of the Plan A. And then Plan B, of course, it's, they're involving you, you're getting more involved. Yeah, it's justified because you have cost of service and all that.
All right, well, I'm seeing nods from our department director, so that'll conclude the workshop. Thanks very much for the great work. We'll look forward to seeing it move forward to the next stage at a future, an upcoming meeting. Thanks. That brings us then to council calendar. Ms. Richardson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow is the first farmers market that's going to be taking place in front of City Hall. And I just wanted to remind everybody that in May 31st is Build Day, and preparations for that project are coming along quite nicely.
All right, any questions on the calendar? City manager report.
Mayor, Council, Diane Richards and I will be with the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce from May 9th to the 26th. We're going to go to Korea and Japan. We'll meet with the companies that are located here, and we'll really focus on recruitment in both of those countries. And while I'm gone, Carol will be in charge.
On what dates?
The 9th through the 22nd.
From the 9th to the 26th?
22nd.
Wow, good going, way to go.
It's a long way.
That's a long way, yeah. Outstanding.
All right, terrific. Any questions on the city manager report? City attorney report? All right, staff direction for members of the council.
I
Mr.
do.
Christoph.
I'll direct this to Carol. 'Cause- No, I'm just kidding. When you go to Rayleigh's and you go on Merkley and then you go buy your groceries, when you come back out and you get onto Merkley, YOLO Bus has a tendency to park their buses that are out of service right by the ingress or the egress, I should say. And it's just very difficult to see around there. I've seen a couple times where I've been very near an accident and that sort of thing. YOLO Bus does that, and sometimes I see some large trucks that do it that are, they block everything. And so I don't know what, I realize it's a city street and all of that, but I thought that maybe we could paint a red line or do something that backs that vehicle away so that the line of sight is okay and it's safe to proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Christoph. Any other staff direction? Future agenda item requests, Mr. Johansson? Yep, the ARP?
Yes.
Yeah, I know the city managers are where we've been having these conversations with the AARP about, we talked about last night about the joining their age-friendly communities program as the second city in California to do so after San Francisco. And we'd be the host of a regional, essentially a regional summit on this work to launch it on June 25th, if we so chose, but we need to so choose if we so choose. So I think Mr. Johannesson would like to agendize this
For the 20th?
for the 20th, so that we will be prepared to if the council concurs to be ready for the 25th in particular. So there's nothing else. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, Ms. Sandine has moved and Mr. Christoph has seconded. The council be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.
All right.